Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much. And I want to welcome our special guest today, Rabbi Benji Elson. Rabbi Benji Elson is a passionate instructor of embodied Jewish practice, a psychotherapist, an author, a musician, a Jewish environmental educator, and a transformative experience facilitator who has been privileged to share his impactful self-transformation teachings globally, including in cities across the US, Israel, the UK, Canada, Mexico, Turkey, Finland, Zambia, South Africa, and India. Wow. Benji's acclaimed book and course, Dance of the Omer, integrates Jewish psychology, kabbalah, chassidus, embodied practices, meditation, state-of-the-art therapeutic modalities, and nature connection, offering a unique path to personal growth and transformation. He is currently working on his second self-transformational guidebook for Elul and Tishrei, the high holidays. As a psychotherapist, Rav Benji works with individuals, couples, and families, utilizing a diverse array of cutting-edge therapeutic approaches, including EMDR, IFS, DBT, CBT, KAP, NLP, Somatic Experiencing, Mindfulness, Regressions, and more. Rabbi Benji is also the co-founder and director of Siach, an innovative Eco-Torah discovery program that combines weekly text study classes, hands-on workshops, and experiential field trips to promote sustainable and embodied Jewish living through Torah and nature connection. Previously, Benji served as educational director and lead transformational facilitator of Shebet Haaretz, leading transformational Jewish expeditions into jungles and deserts to reconnect participants with themselves, spirituality, and Judaism. I want to do the jungle. On a more personal note, Rav Benji's colorful life experiences include living in 2 veggie oil-fueled mobile homes, shepherding goats in the Jerusalem hills, meditating in Indian ashrams, living and working on Jewish farms around the globe, and volunteering in remote African villages. He is thrilled to be with the members of Nishmat, and I have to tell you that I've always wanted to live on this, do a farm thing and live on a farm. So, wow, amazing. Wow.
It's not too late.
And look how young you are. Look how young you are, and look what you've done. My goodness. Okay, go ahead. We're looking forward.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Good to see some familiar faces, Michal. Amazing. There's a lot of other names. If people can turn on their cameras, that'd be wonderful. I'm not one of these teachers that can just speak for hours to a screen. I really need to see faces to know if it's landing or not. So thank you, Naomi, for inviting me to speak to everyone here. I think people are around the world, mostly in New York, and I've heard a little bit about the project. It's really wonderful. So kol hakavod to all your work, Naomi. So this can go in many different ways. Maybe if everyone can write in the chat what their connection, just in a few words. Obviously, it's Sfirat Omer right now, and we're going to be talking about Sfirat Omer. So just so I can get a sense, what do we know about Sfirat Omer? What's our experience with it? Have we counted all of our lives? Have we never counted? Just write in the chat a little bit so I can get a sense. Counting. All right, good. Okay, great. Naomi, you have I could take this in many different ways.
Okay.
What do you think would be the most appropriate with the group that's here right now?
So I think Michal Liba just said something. I'd like to understand how to embody the feminism of Malchus. Your book rocks. I think, you know what? I think that a lot of us, I know that I count and I try to learn every day. I have your book, and so many people are putting different things. We actually sometimes read from your book in the group, and yeah. And I think that I don't know what it is. Maybe it's me, but I have a hard time grasping for some reason. I don't know if everybody feels this way, but I have a hard time grasping like the little tidbits that are put up, like try to focus on this and try to focus and try to feel more compassionate in your compassion today and in your your embodiment of this. And it's always, I find that it's not enough like tangible. Do you ever hear this from anybody else?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, that's precisely why I wrote my book, because a lot of people were saying this over the years, and I really hope, I mean, people share that my book has been helpful. But of course, sometimes it's too much, right? But I wrote it so that when you come back to it year after year, you can find new things. Like it's really dense and layered. So, but of course, sometimes if there's too much, right? The Gemara says, "Tafasta meruba lo tafasta." If you're trying to grab for too much, then you don't grab anything. Which I think touches on what you're talking about, right? Often, and this is a struggle in Sfirat Omer in general, especially, every year I run a course over Sfirat Omer, and this question comes up. It's like there's so much every day, how I'm not even focused on this day, and then we're already onto the next day. How can I possibly, do anything over this time? So of course, there's many, many different layers and ways that we can tap into Sfirat Omer. We could, most basically just count, right? Just count the day, which of course is the foundation of the mitzvah, the basic mitzvah, and of course, if that's the mitzvah, then that's good enough. But there's many, many different layers that we can do. We can become conscious of what day this is. We can read a book. We can do some specific exercises that are connected to the sfirot of that day, right? So it's I like to think of it as choose your own adventure. And every year we're in a different place. Maybe this year we'll choose, this adventure. Next year we'll choose another adventure. The next year we might be like, okay, I really need to dive really deeply into this. So
Can
yeah.
I maybe suggest, like, we're living in really shaky times, right? And I think that everybody is feeling a bit unrooted, right? Nobody really, we're in very uncertain times. Like you're saying, like different years, we would focus on different things. Like what would you say this year specifically, what we can focus on in terms of feeling more rooted, feeling more connected to Hashem, feeling more connected to ourselves, feeling more almost hopeful and you know what I mean? Positive and all the things that I think that everybody on some level is struggling with. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right, totally, yeah. So it really, I don't think there's any one answer, because there's 106 people on this call. It's actually increased since I joined, so that's great. But of course, people in New York might be struggling with different things than us here in Jerusalem and California, all these things. There's definitely, of course, in the general Jewish world, there's a real angst, right? A real kind of existential confusion going on with the past couple of years in the war, with things that are going on politically in the States, all sorts of different levels of reasons that we can be confused. And I think becoming grounded within ourself, right? How do we make sense of the world? We usually, no matter how much information we try to read or ingest, if we're not feeling grounded within ourself, then it doesn't really help. So I think if we focus really on this year on finding our foundation, our groundedness, our rootedness, that is really, really important. No matter what you're struggling with on a personal level, on a communal level, on a Jewish level, globally, all those things, which is really what Sfirat Omer is all about, right? Now that answer, it's a hard question to answer because everyone needs to really figure it out for themselves. But did that somewhat answer your question?
I don't know if questions can really be answered today, but maybe a direction of what's happening, and I think
yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, please. We're looking
Okay,
to
great.
you.
So let me just dive in with a few thoughts, and of course, it's just scratching the surface in a few minutes. But maybe let's go back to just kind of setting the scene for Sfirat Omer, what we're doing here, why we're counting, right? All of these things. So where we find ourselves in the Jewish calendar, of course, is the beginning of the year, right? So there's four, famously, like the Mishnah says, there's 4 New Years in the Jewish calendar. There's two most important ones for us is, of course, Rosh Hashanah, which is the first of Tishrei, which is on the other half of the year, and the first of Nisan, which happened about a month ago. We just started ER, the second month of the year, right? And there's a few reasons why Nisan is perhaps a very significant beginning of the year, the creation of the year, right? So the Gemara already records 2,000 years ago. There's a machloket, when actually was the world created? Was it created in Tishrei, where Rosh Hashanah is, or was it created in Nisan, and now we're beginning a new year? So the Gemara doesn't really answer it. They say gam v'gam, right? All of these words are living words of the living Torah. Tosfot, many years later, explains that actually Tishrei, right, what we call Rosh Hashanah, is the conception of the world, and Nisan is the actual physical creation of the world. So we can't get super into that. And in my next book, I'm going to devote a large section to. I have devoted a large section to explaining the differences. But really, one is at the beginning of winter, which is the conception, and the other is the beginning of spring and summer, which is the physical creation of the world. 2 proofs of that, very good proofs. One is that in any Jewish book that's ever been written about the calendar and the cycle of the Jewish calendar starts with Nisan. So that's a pretty good proof, right? Every single one starts with Nisan, goes through. Of course, the Torah itself, right, says that Nisan is the first month of the year. But even more than that, every 28 years, we have a very unique, rare, and special bracha called Birkat HaChama, the blessing of the sun. And the reason why it happens only once in 28 years is because you can only say that when the sun is in the exact location that it was on the first day when it was created, which is on a Wednesday, Tuesday night, Wednesday, right? The 4th day of creation. And in Nisan, right? So we say that bracha in Nisan on a Wednesday when the sun is in the same location, based on way beyond my pay grade of the exact, astronomy of that. But that's when we say the bracha, and it's in Nisan. So it's a very, very clear proof that the world came into being in Nisan. So if that's true, right? So the Kabbalists give us a very clear direction on what to do at the beginning of the year, right? Well, before that, even the Torah says, right? We have Nisan, and we have Pesach on the full moon of Nisan, and then we start counting through for 50 days until we get to Har Sinai, until we get to Matan Torah. And what the Kabbalists tell us to do during this time, right? There's a play on words, Sfirat Omer, to count, the spore, to count. But the Kabbalists also say, no, it's also talking about the Sfirot, right? And what they say, what they tell us to do is that our job actually in this time is to help put the sfirot back together, right? And Kabbalah 101, Tzimtzum, right? God wanted to create the world. How can there be a finite reality in existence if there's only God and God is infinite? And so the Kabbalists explain that God created within God's self a vacuum space, a hollow space that had been stripped of layers of divinity. And within that space, Hashem planted the sfirot. I don't know if you could say planted, but planted, right? And that was the framework and the template through which all of reality would start to come together. It's kind of like a sacred geometry, or the ingredients to put together reality. The issue, of course, right? The Kabbalists explain that when Hashem shined light, the Or Ein Sof, the infinite divine light, through the pipelines, the Sinurot, into the Sfirot, they were designed in such a way that because they were finite, they shattered, right? And it wasn't a design flaw like we find in some of the buildings here in Jerusalem. It was on purpose, and the reason the Kabbalists explain is because our job as human beings is to help Hashem put the Sfirot back together. And that's what we're doing on Sfirot Omer. Each day we're putting a certain combination of the Sfirot back together, so to speak, helping put the world back together at the beginning of every year, as we're putting ourselves back together, as we're starting along this journey, as we're discovering who we are again. Maybe another point, right? What do we do at the beginning of a year? I don't know how deep to go into this. The reason why there's the focus on Sfirat Omer is not exactly tshuva, right? We have tshuva in Elul and Tishrei, right? And that's the middle of the year. So what we do in the middle of the year really is check that we're actually on track with what we wanted to do in the year, right? That's a very good thing to do in the middle of the year. Am I on track, right? So we have all of Elul, and then we have Tishrei. And by the way, we also play with the Sfirot on the other side of the year in Tishrei, but in the reverse order. But I'm going to leave that aside for now. Right, so that's what happens in the middle of the year. We do tshuva. We make sure at the beginning of the year, though, we don't dive into tshuva. We dive into movement. We dive into renewal. We dive into just all of the path of the sfirot that the Kabbalists have laid out for us. And I think it's important, right? We're not even though we're growing and even though we're doing inner work and of course that's connected to tshuva, but we're not like beating ourselves up. I mean, we shouldn't beat ourselves up in Tishrei either, but there's maybe more room for that to happen there. What we're doing here is really becoming playful, tapping into a young, youthful energy. Which is really what Nisan, Iyar, and Sivan are all about. We in the cycle of the year, kabbalistically, each month has a sense connected to it, which is connected to all the different aspects kabbalistically, right? The permutation of the divine name, which explains how Hashem's energy is funneling through the world in that specific month, which is connected, of course, to the mazal, to the zodiac, which is, of course, connected to many different things. And there's a sense. These senses are not, of course, the 5 Western senses, because there's 12 of them, but they're ways in which we interact or perceive reality. And there's 12 of them, and what the senses really are meant to take us through, or supposed to guide us through, is a journey of maturation, of becoming more mature, of growing. And each season, right, there's 3 months divided by 4, 12. Each season is connected to a different stage of life, let's say, a different stage of development in life. The first 3, Nisan, Iyar, and Sivan, are connected to infancy or childhood. And so we're really tapping into this renewal, this almost childlike infant baby wonder, eyes opening. Spring is here. The flowers. I was walking through Jerusalem on Shabbos. The colors of the flowers that are out right now are amazing, and the smells and the temperature of the air. It's just there's that's why it's the Gemara says that Pesach has to, we have a leap year to make sure that Pesach is the beginning of spring, because we our internal journey is mirrors and is informed and is supported by what's going on in the physical world. So that's what's going on these 3 months, and just to go through these 3 Kabbalistic senses. Right. The first thing, the 3 senses in Nisan, it's speech. Right. In ER, it's hirhor, it's thought, but specific type of thought, hirhor, not machshava. And in Sivan, it's halicha, it's walking, it's movement, it's going. So if we think about the development of an infant, a baby, what is the first thing a baby does? Cries. Right? Hopefully, maybe smiles, but usually cries, right? And also, so communication, dibor, this trying to speak, communicate, and that's what everything connected to Pesach is about, right? Pesach, the open mouth, the conversating mouth. Paro is the constricted mouth, or the evil mouth. Mitzrayim is the constricted place. The Haggadah, right, telling it over. All of Pesach on the full moon of Nisan is all about trying to become more conscious and mature in our ways that we communicate in our speech, in our talk. So that's the focus of Nisan. Then we get to Iyar, which is thought, but specifically hirhor, and it's very subconscious or immature thought still, right? It's and that's what the work of Iyar, the work of this month. We have so many different holidays within this month. There's Lag BaOmer, which is really all about everything here is all about fixing our thought, fixing the way we think, and connected to the energy of the month of Iyar, which we're in right now, which is healing, right? And emotional healing, psychological healing has to do with becoming more mature in our thoughts, becoming more controlled in our thoughts, right? I often share with my clients, especially people with a hard time with emotional regulation, trauma, all these different things. What we usually want to do is we want to validate our feelings, right? Our emotions, because emotions don't really lie. But we usually want to challenge our thoughts, because even though it usually feels the opposite, right? Like our emotions lie, but our thoughts are in our control. The truth is that often the thoughts that we have, the judgments that are triggered by the emotions, are usually false. But the emotion itself is just an objective experience, right? It's not lying. It could have been triggered by another thought that was a lie or was false, right? That triggered this emotion. But this emotion itself, right? So is not. I hope that was clear enough. So we always want to acknowledge the emotion and challenge the thought, and that's what we're doing in Elul, also in Elul, but that's what we're doing in Iyar, right? When we become masters of our thought, of our inner dialogue, of the self judgments that we have, or judgments of others, then we can get to a place of healing, and that's really the only way to heal. After that, we get to Sivan, and there's a big machloket in the Gemara, right? What's more important, learning or doing, right? And there's a few different opinions. It kind of gets down to the bottom line that really, if anyone's learning that's done without actually doing, right, doing the mitzvot, doing things in the world, doing good deeds, their Torah is also going to be forgotten. So I think it's Rabbi Yishmael. I think it's Rishon Bar Yochai, maybe Rishman. I'm blanking on it. But the essence, the point of Torah is the movement, is the action, is the walking, is walking the path of halacha, walking this balanced path. So we could, right, on an immature level, right, we could be walking and stumbling and falling over like a baby is learning at the beginning of their life. And but what the Torah that's given in Sivan on the 6th of Sivan is a Torah on how to walk more skilled, more maturely through the world by doing things, by being involved in the world, all of those things. So that's what we're doing here. And I threw out, there was a lot that I said. I think I'll just say one more thing, and maybe we'll we'll open up for questions. Right. The point of Spir Omer is not to get overwhelmed. Especially, like the whole did I say a bracha? Did I not? Am I still in? Am I not? So that's another whole conversation. And that can also cause a lot of anxiety. But what we really want to do is we want to play around. We want to be curious. We want to be playful. And every day we have an opportunity, just an opportunity to tap into a different personality trait, right? What are the 7 lower sefirot that we're dealing with are personality traits, right? And then we're dealing with combinations of personality traits. So to just tap in for a few moments a day to, okay, become more conscious of a personality trait, seeing it in the world, all the different levels that, of course, I go into, almost 500 pages of depth on how to do that. But that's the basic. So I think let's pause for questions.
So I'm gonna if people can put their hands up, that would be great. Elson, I want to ask you something. So when you explain the 3 months, right? Like the 3 months, is that correlating? The first is the dibor, right? The maturity of how to speak, right? How we express ourselves, and you gave the analogy of the baby who cries out, who's trying to express its needs, right? That's how we start versus, so is each one, are all those 3 things all correlated to the concepts of the sefirot? Is that tied together?
Not exactly, because there's 12. It's a slightly different system. There's 12 senses and there's 10 sefirot.
Right.
So so it doesn't. There's not like one sefira per month. What's more precise is the permutation of the divine name of Yud He and Vav He, and that is really reflective of how the divine energy is manifesting in this world, which is it's different than the sefirot. So, like, for example, Nisan, right, is straight Yud K and Vav K, right? It's just beginning of the year, Hashem's lights coming in, straight, this is it, yalla, let's go, right? And then Sivan, then ER, which we're in now, is the two. There's the beginning half is Yud He is coming in straight, and then the second half is turned around. And that's kind of like the top down, bottom up meeting. That's chasadim and dinim, chesed and gevura, a lot of different layers to that. Masculine, feminine coming towards center. So the sefirot don't play out precisely over the 12 months like that.
Okay, Mazal, you want to go ahead? Mazal?
No, thank you so much. Thank you. Hi, Shavot Tov. Hi. So actually, I have a very strong connection to the sphere, and my birthday is in one of the days, which is Kaf Bet Iyar. So it's very interesting, and I've always been curious. Maybe you can help me understand this. So it's 37 Yom 37, which is Lamed Zayin, which is the letters of my name. Mazal, Lamed Zayin is in there too, and the the Sphera, it says to Gvura Shebeyasod, which is restrained with in relationships. So I want to know if there's any connection with that, because I've always struggled with that part in my life. I always felt like that was something that I had to work on. And I want to know if there's any connection between a person and their goals, if they are connected to some day of the Sphera.
Yeah, great question. Everyone always asks me that question. People will come over and say, "Hey, I was born on this day. What? Give me the lowdown of who I am." Of course, I don't know. but but yeah, Rabbi Nachman says in the Likutei Moharan that everything that someone hears someone else saying is connected to that sphere of the day. Right? It's like a very high level of meditating on the day. And everything that we speak is also connected to the sphere of that day. We just have to figure out how. We could spend you wake up in the morning with your cup of coffee, say one line, and then spend the next 23 hours trying to figure out how that was connected to the sphere. I don't think he means for us to do that. But yeah, there's definitely there's I gave a class the other week on reincarnation. It was connected to Yom HaZikaron, trying to, how do we have one level of understanding Yom HaZikaron. These people were taken, beyond before their time. So I gave a whole class on reincarnation. Why was I saying that? So someone asked in the class, we're talking about, they're like, I'm worried about coming back again. How do I know so that was sorry, I'm a little flustered right now. The Rav Chaim Vital says that we're sent back in a reincarnation because we didn't fulfill the certain mitzvot that we're here to do in this lifetime, right? One of the big questions is we have 316 mitzvot to do, but it's impossible to do it all in one lifetime. You have to be a Kohen, Levi, Israel, man, woman, king, divorcee. It's just literally impossible to do them all. So Rav Chaim Vital writes at the beginning of Shar Gilgulim, his book on Gilgulim, on reincarnation, is that we're sent down in lifetimes to fulfill certain mitzvot that we didn't do before. So someone asked in the class, how do we figure that out? So the general guidance is that we usually have two mitzvot that we focus on, one negative and one positive. The thing that we feel very connected to, and like really the mitzvah we feel connected to positive, that's probably what we're here to do, right? The positive mitzvah. So if it's tzedakah, if it's any of these things, and the negative mitzvah that we struggle with the most is probably the negative mitzvah that we're here to fix, right? So what all of our struggles, that was a very winded way of talking about your question, the struggles. Definitely when the day that you were born, with the spherot of that energy, there's definitely a lot of layers of tikkun for you to do right there, and all of us, whoever's born this time. The other thing I'll say in connection to that, right? We usually think we have the seven shepherds, right? The Ushpizin that are connected to the Sfirot, right? We have Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, David, and we invite them in to the sukkah on Sukkot, but we also are connecting with them here. So the mainstream understanding of that is that these specific people, right? Avram was just through and through chesed, right? Just from the when he was born to the moment he died, he was the full embodiment of chesed. and Yitzchak and Yaakov and so on and so forth. But the truth is, if we even just superficially look through their stories, right, in the Tanakh, it's very clear, or we have a lot of questions, right? It doesn't seem like he actually was embodying chesed. And so there's people that come up with, mental acrobatics to explain how no, this was really chesed and it was the deepest chesed. And there's of course room for that. But I think the pshat is that they actually spent most of their life trying to embody that sphere, and that's why they're the embodiment of that sphere. Not because they were just born into this world and they didn't have any struggle with it and they were just aligned with it, but they really had to work to embody the sphere. So, and we can go through all of them. I mean, Avram, was
Chesed.
Not chesed. What?
Was chesed, right? Avram was chesed.
All right, Avram was chesed, but most of his life he was gevura. He was a warrior. He sent to all of the stories. And Yitzchak was quite a pushover actually for most of his life, right? The Plishtim came and clogged up his wells, and he moved on. And Yaakov's house was not balanced, was not harmonious. There was no he's lying all the time, right? There's these things. Aaron was actually the leader of the Jewish people for 80 years until Moshe shows up, right? So he's not Hod, he's Netzach. Moshe ran away from authority and power most of his life until he was 80. So he had to work really hard to get to Netzach, right? And then Yosef, of course, has his struggles with Yisod. All of them are struggling with these things to embody them and to align with them. So Mazal, that was still to answer your question. That yeah, it doesn't. When we're born on a certain day of the Sefira, it very well could be that we are called on, and this is our struggle, and this is and for all of us. I mean, every day of Sefirat Omer, this is the work, this is the struggle for us to do on that day.
Rav Elson, it's so interesting. There was a few things that I'm going to open it up again, but there's a few things that I'd love you to expand on. Michaliba wants to ask a question, but there's a few things. Number one, I never heard that concept before. I never even thought about it before, how you pointed out that all these, the seven shepherds actually were the antithesis. They were the opposite of the midah that we all see them. We view them through this lens of this midah. I never heard that before. I'd love that to be expanded. The second thing I'd love for you to answer is
I'll say that there's in the book, and the introduction to each week, there's probably 5 pages on each of the characters to explain that in great detail.
That is unbelievable. That is really an unbelievable concept. Actually, it changes your whole understanding even of what you strive for and the way you view things, because they were actually the opposite most of their lives of that. So that's really, really interesting. The second thing you said, very, very interesting, you talked about Gilgulim. You said, do we know for a fact that we have to experience every one of those Gilguls? Like we have to come back and experience what it means to be a divorcee? Wait a second, that's what. And then you said something about Rabbi Nachman, so very, very interesting. You said that every day that you wake up in the Sefira, the day of the Sefira, and you have a thought, Rabbi Nachman says that thought is connected to the day of that Sefira when you really, like, it's almost like that thought is put in. That's another thing I wanted to ask you. And the last thing you mentioned is, do you think that people that are born in the Sefira, the neshamas that come down specifically in the times of the Sefira, specifically were brought down in that day for a specific reason? So those are the 4 things that you brought up, and very, very interesting, Michaliba, of what that is. It's fascinating what you brought up.
Yeah. So just to answer on one foot, so I would have to check what he said. I think he only explicitly said words, what's spoken, but we could, of course, expand that to also thoughts. Going back to what you were saying about Rabbi Nachman, the book is sitting up there, but I think I won't take the time to try to find it right now. The second question, yeah, the mechanisms of reincarnation are it's a very, very long book, Shar Gugulim, many chapters. It's very, very complex. I wouldn't say that not everyone needs to be divorced. I don't know, but I'll just say, this is in the beginning of Shar Gugulim. He explains that actually, right, we're all one of his big questions in the fifth introduction, the fifth Hakdama. He answers the question of what body are we gonna have when we come back in Yach's time, right? So, but he also explains that every time we come back, there's a different combination of our nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, nechida, right? So we have 5 levels of the soul, right, which are connected to different aspects of our consciousness and psyche, and what he explains is, actually, Rabbi Nachman explains this also very, very succinctly. Rabbi Nachman says that God doesn't do the same thing twice. That's his opening line. God doesn't do the same thing twice. So when you come back for a second life, you're not actually the same soul. And you have a different, your nefesh is connected with maybe someone else's neshama. Because if you had the same nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, you would do the same things over and over and over again. That wouldn't be helpful. So you actually come back with a different combination of souls, right? And it depends what number of life you're here. Depends if you're a new soul, an old soul, an intermediate soul, right? There's no easy questions to all this. I understand. It's one of the things about reincarnation is a very wise and sophisticated and nuanced explanation of personalities, of people's personalities, right? Connected to the 5 levels of the soul and past trauma, all the things that go into what a personality is. So that's connected to it. The third question that you were saying was, do people born in this time have unique roles? I think so.
Okay, I'm gonna open it up to Michaliba. Michaliba, are you still there? Michal?
Hi. Yes,
Hi,
yes,
here you are.
yes.
Okay.
Hi, Naomi. Good
Good to see you.
Nice to see you also. Wow. I'm so humbled to be here. It's not even a joke. First of all, everybody, this is probably the most nuanced sefer ever alive. No joke. I have read it since I bought it. Like, if you look at my book, almost every line is underlined because I couldn't, you want to separate your underlines, but everything is underlined with exclamation points and wow and oh my gosh and have to share this. And thank you so much for bringing this to the world. Really, really. And your classes have been, phew. But my question is 2 things. I think I'm forgetting. What?
We miss you in the course this year.
Oh, I would love to be part of it. Gosh, what was my question? Okay, yeah. Okay, nothing profound in the question here, but would you say that the opposite of trying to find one's sense of self-worth or you can know that Hashem loves you and you can have all that intellectually. You know that you are part of Am Yisrael and you have a mission and Hashem wants you every morning that you wake up because Hashem wants you, but you could have this existential feeling that no matter what you try to do therapeutically, you still seem to maybe struggle with that nakuda. So if one does, is that the opposite of Malchus? Is there a sphera that one should focus on to study it and then integrate it and to help it? I mean, is that related or am I just throwing something very not really related?
Yeah, good question. I think if I'm understanding the question accurately enough, there's you know, the spirits are like a full package.
Yeah,
You know,
I
like
know.
you need to
Work on
get all
each
of
one.
right in balance. So one specific, there are like openings, right? There's like, okay, so one person might need to like focus on this specific sphere to get into the door, and then, you know, work on the other ones after. I think specifically Netzach, which we're about to go into this week, is connected to that. Netzach is all about, right? It's mastery and victory on the most external or manifesting, tangible way. But of course, to get to there, there's layers underneath, right? So at its core, Netzach is connected to self-esteem and self-confidence, and the bracha of every sphere is connected to one of the brachot in the Amidah, in the Shemona Esrei. And if you look at the Sfardim, still keep this alive in their siddur. Everyone else has kind of forgotten about it. But if you look at a Sephardi siddur, the nikudot of under Hashem's name in each of the bracha is connected to that sphira. And if you look at a Kabbalistic siddur, there's lots of intentions over there. The bracha that's connected to Netzach is Mevarech Hashanim, the blessing for abundance in the land. And what the Gemara talks about, the Gemara in I think it's Megillah, Ayah Brachas or Megillah, I think it's Megillah, when it explains the brachot of the Amidah, it says that you need to say them in order, because not just the text was given from the prophets and the Anshe Knesset Gedolah, but the order was very important. And really, every time we say the Amidah, one of the ways that we can daven, or ought to daven maybe, is a journey through the Sfirot. So the bracha of Mevarech Hashanim, the Gemara says that bracha is to counter the price gougers that might try to inflate the price. You have to look in the Gemara for all the specifics. But and what that means, right, is why? Because if there's abundance in the land, then there's not going to be a fear of scarcity. And then the price gougers won't have an opportunity to gouge the prices, because they're playing off the fears of the people, which maybe goes back to, Naomi, what we were talking about at the beginning, right? This unsettled time over here. Maybe this is a real focus right now of kind of this abundance mindset, even within the chaos of what's going on and all the uncertainty and all the reasons for us to doubt ourselves as Jews, as individuals, right? All these things. So Netzach really is a focus this week, is to really cultivate an abundance, a mindset of abundance, which can increase our self-confidence and self-esteem, so that we can be more precise in our actions.
And what do you think Hashem is so
Wait,
hidden from us?
say something, Nami?
Yeah. Why do you
wanted
think that we're feeling such a hiddenness of Hashem now during this time?
Yeah, it's definitely things are heating up on the global playing field, right? The days that are yet to come are coming. and things are heating up in all sorts of interesting and scary ways. And part of that, there's more hiddenness when, right? It's the whole, it's kind of like the there's also it's I think connected to what outside of the Gemara, definitely the Arizal, the Chassidim also, right? At the end of days, I think it's a Nida, where Mashiach will only come when all of the souls have come into the world to do their tikkun. And so one of the understandings of kind of this burst of population that we're seeing now, and also perhaps the increase of females in the world, also is that Hashem is sending all of the souls in at this time, to do the final tikkun. And of course, if there's lots more souls, there's lots more messiness, and things are heating up and more hidden, so that we can actually do our final tikkun. If there was more revealed light, then we wouldn't have an opportunity to do our tikkunim for Mashiach to come. So that seems to be what's going on.
Khaliba, you go ahead. You wanted to ask. You wanted to continue the question.
Well, just a clarification, because I feel like self-confidence and self-esteem to me is very different. Like I feel very confident in doing things, but sometimes I question my own, I have like an ego struggle where I don't feel like, I know that sounds weird, but like I'll go and do something. I feel very like I can go out there and make things happen. I feel very confident, but I don't know what, does that sound very, I know this is not a private session. I'm just saying for anyone else that I think might be struggling with that, that's all. If it's not important, we can skip it. Do you agree with that? In relation to Netzach.
Say it again?
In relation to Netzach, I'm saying, just in continuation with what you were saying before.
Yeah. Tzorchian.
What does that mean?
We need to explore it more.
Okay.
I don't know if I can give a quick answer.
Gotcha. No problem.
Does anybody else want to ask Rav Elson anything? Does anybody have any other questions? Were there any questions in the chat?
I will just to respond to Nechama, what Nechama wrote here. So first of all, definitely, I don't know if everyone would frame all of the avot, and their sfirot like this. I do think it. What Nechama wrote over here is that they were their midah, but they had nisyonos to. That is a more mainstream understanding, but I think it's a little bit harder to make sense of all the stories if it's coming from that angle. So I think if you're interested, you can read through the sections in my book, and then we can argue.
I'm going to share it with the group. I'm going to share all the different ways to be in touch. No, but I think as like you said, we're getting closer and closer. We don't know exactly what that means, right? I think that the revelation of the Torah is becoming brighter in ways that are a bit different than we were hadrachad. It's so interesting because Michal Liba asked that question. I grew up from, and I was hadrachad in many different places in many different ways. And when I read the Omer, right, when I do the Sfiras Omer, and then I look like you have to have control of your chesed, right? You have to have boundaries outside the store. That idea to me, right, is an idea. I'm just going to put people on. I'm just going to put you on. Someone else wants to ask a question, but that idea to me is foreign, right? It's almost like a foreign idea. And I think that as we're getting closer to truth, as more and more truth, I think the judgments or the perfection of the way that we interpret what perfection is as humans is very different, I think, than the perfection of what really is. And I think that a perfect example of that is the way that you described the avos and you know what I mean? And I really want to look into that, because that to me is fascinating. It really is, because it changes the whole trajectory. It changes the whole narrative of understanding, even allowing, giving yourselves, giving us, all of us, the room to understand that there is much more room than we thought there was. And I think that's people like you coming out with these books and expanding on these ideas in a way that is coming out differently than 10, 20, 30 years ago, is allowing that growth, that self-growth, and that self-esteem that even Michaliba is talking about. It's the maturity that's happening. You know, you talk about the maturity of the Dibor. I think it's the maturity of what's coming out in the world. But I'm going to give Batsheva Esther the ability. Batsheva Esther, go ahead, and then we're going to let him.
Sorry, Batsheva, just before, I just want to say one quick thing, because we've been throwing a lot of chassidus out. So to add the full picture. So Rav Hutner also in a famous letter, one of his students wrote to him saying, you know, I'm broken because I'm full of such, you know, terrible thoughts and deeds and all these things. So he wrote back really in saying what we're talking about. He's saying, you know, it's a little bit of a handicap that we give ourselves when we hold our tzaddikim on this pedestal, including the avos, and we say that they didn't mess up, and you don't look at their mistakes. And he quotes the pasuk from Mishlei, I believe, right, where Sheva Yipol Sadik, that a Sadik falls 7 times and gets back up. The continuation of that pasuk, which people don't usually quote, is that a Rasha, a wicked person, stumbles once and is done. And he says, you know, we often think that a tzaddik is a tzaddik despite the fact that he falls and gets back up. But he says, no, they're a tzaddik because they fell. And he says it explicitly, because they fell 7 times. And so we can all gain a lot of self-confidence in that, you know, just because that's really what a lot of my next book is really all about, in Elul and Tishrei and Tshuva and how to, you know, all those things. But it's the falling that helps us mature and get bigger and all those things. Just wanted to add that.
No, it's so true. My father was the driver for Rav Hutner, you know. He was. My father was he was in yeshiva. Rav Hutner was the Rosh Yeshiva, and he used to drive him.
Wow.
Yeah, he said he was unbelievable. The way he had respect for his wife was unbelievable.
Wow.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Batsheva. Hi, Batsheva. How are you?
I really enjoyed.
Been a while. You look beautiful.
Thank you. I enjoyed learning this new way of looking at how our avot basically took a complete U-turn on their nature and grew to be who they were. What I want to ask is, you mentioned something, I'm not sure if I understood correctly, or if you could elaborate if I did understand correctly. You said something about the reason we're at the end of days is, you mentioned something about there's more women. Did I understand you correctly?
Mm-hmm.
How does that have to do with coming?
Yeah. As I said that, I thought I was opening up a can of worms.
I just want to understand. I wasn't sure. Did I hear it right? Did I?
You did.
Well, I think there's a few ways to understand that, but I think it's a little bit of a gift from Hashem, of like, you know, the men might not actually be able to get their job done, to perfect themselves. So maybe if we send them down as a women, then it'll work. So
we all believe that.
Yeah.
Okay, but how does that work with? I'm just having a hard time grasping this. How is that gonna work with marriages? How is that gonna work with shidduchim? You're saying there's more women in the world than there is men?
That's what they say. I haven't counted them all, but yeah, that's what they say. That's what the shidduch crisis also says.
But how do you make sense of that with the concept of the whole idea of pruavu, right? The whole idea of the whole reason of creation is family and pruavu into continuity.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe we're meant to go back to the old days when men can marry more than one woman. That's the direction. Who knows?
And women give birth to 9 children at once.
Right. Yeah, I think I might get myself in trouble if we deep dive into the maybe we can do this another time when it's not being recorded.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions before we allow Rabbi Elson to go? Anybody? Anybody like to ask anything?
I'll say one thing. No, I won't.
Rifki wanted to ask something. Go ahead, Rifki.
Well, I actually wrote it in the chat. If I was first being involved in trying to do a daily limud with the spheros, would I be better off starting from the beginning? Is there sort of like a connection and a growth, or do I plug in now and just go?
Great question. That's a great question. So I would plug in now because and you can the energy of it's like it kind of which is also the thing about the counting, right? You can't make up for the counting. The energy of the sphera that are within this day is the energy of this day. And if you go back and start then you're kind of, out of sync. So I would start now, get in sync, and then, go back and try to gather at least the concepts, the idea to find your way within it, to add the other components. But definitely the work is to be aligned with the energies of the days as they're unfolding.
Thanks. Yeah, that's what I thought. I also sent this information of this class to my daughter because I said, Shira, this is right up your alley. And she looked at it. She was like, oh, my daughter is Shira Nechama Mitzman. So.
What does that sound so familiar? Why does that sound so familiar? That name.
Like, yeah, don't go there.
Okay. Anybody else? I think there was one more person that wanted to ask. Chaya, go ahead.
Yes.
And then we're going to let him go because we're holding him for a long time, and then we have to finish our davening. Go ahead.
I was just wondering. I understand that.
Another class coming up in a few hours for my course.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay, quickly.
I understand you do a lot of type of therapies and trauma therapy and stuff like that. I'm wondering, like, is there a point where trauma is like too far gone and it doesn't pay to even, you can't, go back there and just, you have to let it go? Or can you really always do good trauma therapy?
It's a good question. I think there's a few questions underneath that. Maybe something that you're also asking is there a point where going back would just open up the trauma in an unhealthy way?
Yeah, that and if it's not going to be helpful anyway, because it's been long years, it's not yesterday's trauma.
Right. So there's many different types of doing trauma therapy. There's more helpful ways, less helpful ways. Really depends on the trauma, how long ago it was, how much it's affecting our life. Even if it's far away, we also could have developed a whole personality and lifestyle and everything connected to that trauma, so that which might be working. And so it's not really a question I can answer.
Okay, I'll reach out to you. Thank you so much. We'll reach out.
But you know what's interesting, what she said, I'm going to let you just go. If you learn to reframe, because you brought it up right from the beginning, right? Emotion is emotion, right? You said that right from the beginning. Remember, that was one of the first things you said. I
wrote that down.
And
that was
emotion
awesome.
is an emotion, but a thought takes that emotion to a different place. So can't you say that the minute you teach someone to reframe their thoughts, that you're then taming that emotion, that the emotion becomes a completely different reality?
Yeah, 100%. Well, our interpretation of an emotion is just a sensation in the body.
Right.
That's all it is, and
it's the thought that creates.
Right, and it's there because it has a purpose and a message that it's trying to communicate. And our thoughts can either be helpful in completing that cycle and circuit, or can disrupt it in all sorts of unhelpful ways. So, and maybe I'll just say a line about trauma. What trauma really is an experience that was so powerful and jolting, which at the time we decided or experienced as not being able to handle, right? So for an example, right, in a certain culture, certain things could be traumatic that aren't traumatic in a different culture, right? The same exact thing could have happened, but because this other person, this other culture is like, oh, well, this is just life. I'm not, it's not. This is normal or whatever.
Very
right?
individual. Yeah.
Right. And what happens because of that, what happens with that trauma is it doesn't fit, that experience doesn't fit within how we understand reality to be and the context in which we understand reality to function. And so therefore it gets stuck, right? And so what trauma therapies, especially EMDR, what they're trying to do is unfreeze that experience or memory, which has thoughts connected to it, has emotions, has physical experiences, all those things, to unfreeze it so that it can melt back into the context of how we understand reality to be. So how to do that, of course, depends on the person, depends on the trauma, depends how long it was. There's different modalities and different ways of doing it.
Okay, so I just want to say that I'm going to share everything. We're gonna let Rav Elson go. I want to tell you that he has the book, The Dance of the Omer. The Dance of the Omer. You can get that on Amazon. I'm going to share everything. I wanted to ask you, is it still worth it for people to come into the Dance of the Omer course? I'm going to share that as well. Is it still worth it for them to, at this point?
If you're interested, reach out today and we can explore it. It's getting borderline. So
Okay.
if you're interested, reach out. It might be possible, but there's a lot to catch up on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to share everything. I want to just thank you so much. This was so unbelievable. We can go on and on and on because it's like, I don't know, it's endless, you know? It's endless.
Yeah. The work of life is
endless.
infinite.
I know it is.
Yeah.
And it seems to be getting more intense than it was 20, 30 years ago, I think. I think because we're getting closer, and therefore there's more work of the soul, I think, in this generation. There was more work of the midot in past generations. In this generation, it's more work of the soul. And I think that's, it's deep, sometimes painful and hard work.
Yeah. 100%. The final tikkunim are sometimes the hardest. It's like easy to, like to become a Baal Tshuva or to start a new project when that's easy. Or writing a book, but it's the last tikkunim that are really that.
Yeah. I think our generation needs a lot more hadracha. I do. I think that because it is so much more complicated, I think that there is like, it's almost like creating a container to make sense. And it's almost like taking a puzzle, and trying to put the pieces together to make sense of how it's supposed to look. And I think that's a big thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Elson. I'll share everything. Thank you so much. Amazing. Thank you so much. This was amazing. Okay, everyone, we're gonna.
And you can get my book now. Still, don't wait, because other people every year are like, it's too late. It's amazing. But then you forget about it next year. If you get it now, you'll have it at the beginning, or at least the beginning of next year. So
you're so right. So I'm going to share everything.